Welcome to our study of American federal government. We're going to cover chapter 1 in American government institutions and policies, chapter edition 17. And we're going to just basically cover the important concepts within the chapter. And that's what we're going to do for this session. Share the screen. We're in chapter 1 of American government. An important concept we're going to cover today, towards the end of our time, is this perceived cost and perceived benefits table, and what that means for us in this course. So that's where we're going to end this session. That's where we're heading to. Let's go to the textbook, chapter 1. When our Constitution was being developed, we were under the Articles of Confederation. They were adopted in 1781, and the way things were set up, the states weren't forced in any way to participate in paying into the government and that kind of thing. It was kind of a disaster, so they did something different. So they couldn't collect money from the states or anything. Now we have a federal budget for 2021 at $4.8 trillion, with a budget deficit of $1 trillion, and they're currently processing, trying to get that up to probably $2 trillion. When they're in current negotiations, they started out at 3.5, working their way down to 2. Budget Control Act of 2011 was called for a long-term deficit reduction, but the White House and Congress could not reach an agreement. So we wind up with sequestration. The government shuts down, and every once in a while that happens now. In order to get an agreement, they basically let things shut down and do what they do. The fundamental problem government finance is political, not mathematical. You can't just mathematically get through these things. There's all kinds of issues and things that people want to have covered. People want things, and they want things. They want their things. They want the things that they are used to. There's all kinds of fights over how to spend the money, where to spend it. We have the political footballs of abortion, school prayer, LGBTQ rights, nuclear waste storage, all these kinds of things going on. And all of these things, we call them an issue. We call them issues. And an issue is a conflict or real apparent between the interests, ideas, and beliefs of different citizens. So we have people don't agree on the same things. This is why we have the kind of republic government that we have instead of a straight democracy. In a straight democracy, people lose big time. The little guy is usually stepped on in a real democracy. Our republic allows for a barrier between the thoughts of the masses and the needs of the people, of all the people. That'll make more sense as we go along in the course. By politics is the activity by which an issue is agitated or settled. In other words, there's no issue if there's no conflict, and politics is how we resolve those issues or conflicts. Anytime you have 3 people, you cannot have politics. It just takes 3 people. Power, authority, and legitimacy. Politics is and the process by which issues are generally agitated and settled involves the exercise of power. Power is the ability of one person to get another person to act in accordance with the first person's intentions. So in order to get someone else to do what you want to do, that's power. Authority, on the other hand, is the right to use power. So the difference between the power and authority is power is getting someone to do what you want to do. authority is the right to get them to do what you want to do. And legitimacy is a political authority conferred by law by the state or national constitution. So legitimacy says you have the authority to use power, and it says so in this document. That's legitimacy. Democracy has two different meanings. That's the rule of the many. You can have direct or participatory democracy. That's a government in which all or most of the citizens participate directly. That could be a small town that everybody gets together to vote yay or nay on things. That could be a church council. That could be all kinds of things. Have a direct participatory democracy. Representative democracy, which is what we have, is a government in which leaders make decisions by winning a competitive struggle for the popular vote. So in order to get in office, they have to compete to get there. For some places, it's not much of a competition, whereas always a Democrat gets in office or always a Republican gets in office based on the people who live in that district for a U.S. representative. It's not always that way. I originally come from Minnesota, and Minnesota has both Democrats and Republicans in the House and the Senate, and we go through quite a few changes in which party is doing what. Okay. So we're going to look at political power in America. There's 5 basic views. One is the class view. And here we have a term of elite, a person who possesses a disproportionate share of some valued resource, such as money, prestige, or expertise. Someone who has potentially more influence. But there's 5 views that exist about how political power is distributed in America. The class view is a view that the government is dominated by capitalists. Okay, so wealthy people have, in this view, have the greatest influence. That would have been issued by Karl Marx, the founder of socialism, talking about the worker class. Socialism originally starts out as people kind of getting together and like buying a factory in France, and they would share in the profits and the responsibilities for running the plant, and a few people would be put in charge of some things because they had skills, but everybody shared in the profits of the plant. It's very much like a modern Aldi store, really. That was the beginning of socialism. It didn't have anything to do with government at all. It was to do with one economic way of doing business. The power elite view is a view that the government is dominated by a few top leaders, most of whom are outside of government. So it talks about the business people, military, labor unions, elected officials control most decisions, it says. With that one, this one is very commonly believed. Labor unions have had a lot of power in the past. The labor unions at one time were essential for the growth of America. But now they are less. Their membership is way down, mainly because they've already done what they needed to do. A lot of the work that the labor unions needed to do to improve conditions in America are already finished and completed. Military has a huge amount of spending. Business groups have the most likely chance of having money to lobby Congress. And elected officials, of course, are already in place to make those decisions. So that's the power elite view. Bureaucratic view is a view that the government is dominated by appointed officials. Now, a bureaucrat, I used to be a bureaucrat. I used to work in the Minnesota Department of Health. They run, basically, this House and the Senate pass statutes. The bureaucrats and the executive branch write rules based on the statutes. And the courts say whether or not what they've done is constitutional. But their own particular leanings in the bureaucrats can make a big difference in how they interpret the statutes that are passed and how they apply them. So they can have some power too. Pluralistic view is the view that the competition among all affected individuals or interests shapes public policy. This is probably the most true, where it's all these combined. And the creedal passion view is the view that morally impassioned elites drive important political changes. If you're going to have a movement, you want to something changes, you want to make some big changes in things, you got to have somebody who takes step up, takes leadership, and they have to have a good, strong passion to do that. They might start an interest group that we'll talk about in other chapters later, but people who have a strong feeling about something might be part of this particular view. Who governs and to what ends? Our course is mostly going to talk about who governs, but there are two main questions, and these are not the same questions. You can't blend them together really. One is we want to know the answer to the first question, who governs, because we believe that those who rule, their personalities and beliefs and their values and vices will affect what they do for us. But that's not always the case. Sometimes they make decisions based on the information they have, but it's not necessarily what they would do for themselves. The answer to the second question is important because it tells us how government affects our lives. Okay. In 1935, 96% of all American families paid no federal income tax, and for the 4% who did, the average was only about 4% of their income. Because we used to get most of our money from tariffs and things like that, and it didn't cost that much to run the government. Tell you, almost all federal families pay federal income tax, and the average rate is about 21% of their income. Lowest rate right now is 15%, but that wouldn't be a family for most people. This book is chiefly devoted to the question of who governs, and that's what we're going to be looking at mostly. How is it done? Expanding the political agenda. What's the political agenda? That's the issues that people believe require government action. And remember, issues are conflicts. Conflicts that people believe require government action. So we have some possibilities here. We have a shared political values. At any given time, what the political agenda is affected by at least four things. Shared political values. People believe that something is particularly important. And the weight of custom and tradition, how we've been doing it. I know that once you start doing something for 2 or 3 years, it's very hard to change. People say, "Oh, we've always done it that way." Well, they haven't really always done it that way, just for a short period of time. But it becomes what people are used to. The importance of events, wars, terrorist attacks. Severe economic downturns, that kind of thing can be a problem. The importance of events, wars, terrorist attacks, that kind of thing can make a big difference. In terms of debate, the way in which the political elites discuss issues influences how the public views political priorities. And one of the things we'll look at when we get to talking about the media is how the media affects this terms of debate, and how they pose questions that will affect how things will work out. The text talks about this time period, 1920s, 1930s, This is a time when America made some massive changes. In 1918, 1917, we had World War I. We had the Spanish flu killed millions of people worldwide, and it changed every place in the world changed because of World War I and the Spanish flu. And this is before, of course, before vaccines and all those kind of things. So you got it. You didn't survive very well. Social Security programs are 1930s, 1920, 1919. The Amendment for Women's Suffrage was passed by Congress and the Senate in the 1920s. It was ratified, and women everywhere got the right to vote. At the same time, we started Prohibition, which had its own issues. We'll talk about later. That was a big turning point, that particular time period. Groups. Many policies are the result of small groups of people enlarging the scope of government by their demands. So people want a new program, and they ask for a new program, and they want racial justice, they want climate change addressed, they want different things. And as they get more attention and things go the way they want them to go, they will get more opportunity to have laws changed in their favor. Add new programs so government grows. In case you're in the a viewpoint that government grows because of one political party or another, both political parties, the Republicans and Democrats, both are expanding government in their own way. The expansion of the conservative side is pro business, we're going to grow more business, we're going to grow opportunity, we're going to support small businesses starting up, we're going to keep large businesses from failing. On the other side, they're going to want to do a lot of things that promote social welfare and that sort of thing. And the two sides are at odds with each other, because the one side says we're best creating opportunity for people to start business and create jobs, and the other side says we have to prop people up so that they can live on what they've got. And that's so they kind of, on a lot of issues, they just talk past each other, and we're going to find that out a lot in a lot of issues, that the two sides just talk past each other rather than talking to each other, which is kind of how we got to where we're at right now, where there's so much conflict. We didn't used to have so much conflict. Republicans and Democrats in the 60s and 70s used to sit down. They'd go into a room saying, we're going to hash out this issue. Reporters will be staying outside. We're going to talk about this, and they come back, they go in and do their thing. They come back out with a compromise. You would not see that today. You would not see that today. They get together to find out what they can do to harass each other. I'm going to switch to my glasses here. I've got my computer glasses on. There, I can see the screen a little better. Your book talks about quite a few things here that you can read. The media is the national press, can either help place new matters on the agenda or publicize those matters placed there by others. If they ignore something, it won't get much attention. It can make a big difference if you can get the national media to cover your story. Action by the states. Our government is it's based on federalism. Okay, a separation between the states and the federal government powers, and we're going to get deep into that. This federalism is a big concept in this course. But federalism allows states to try something. A state sets out to do something. Other states are watching it, kind of an experiment. As they go along, they'll try different things, and other states watch and see what happens. example given here has to do with smoking, where it's tried out in some states and then becomes federal. The politics of different policy issues. This is an extremely important concept for our course. We're going to look at costs and benefits. Okay, the cost of something is a burden that people believe they must bear if a policy is adopted. So, what is it going to cost us if we do this thing? The benefit is the satisfaction that most people believe they will enjoy if the policy is adopted. First thing we have to remember is that this is perceived costs and benefits, not actual true costs and benefits. What do people perceive will cost them? And the second thing we have to think about is that people take into account not only who benefits, but also whether it is legitimate for that group to benefit. Should we legitimately doing what we're doing for these people? And some of the issues that we'll talk about in this for assignments will be talk about things like ESL classes and that sort of thing paid for by the federal government. 4 types of politics. All right. Things are either widely distributed benefits, costs and benefits. I'm going to highlight that for you here. Or narrowly concentrated. For instance, a widely distributed cost would include an income tax, a social security tax, a high rate of crime. A widely distributed benefit might include retirement benefits for all citizens, clean air, national security, or low crime rates. So here is our little chart here. We have majoritarian politics. Let's switch over here to this guy. Well, that's kind of fuzzy, but at least you can see it. We have perceived costs, distributed and concentrated. We have perceived benefits, concentrated and distributed over here. And majoritarian politics are those the policy which almost everybody benefits and almost everyone pays. Okay. Interest groups, which we have a whole chapter on, are important in majoritarian politics because citizens rarely will have much incentive to join an interest group if the policy is as such as group supporters will benefit everybody. There's a free rider problem, and we'll talk about that later. But majoritarian politics may be controversial, but the controversy is usually over matters of cost and ideology, not between rival interest groups. Everybody wants something in particular. It's just how they're going to go about doing it is a question for majoritarian politics. Interest group politics, which is in the opposite side, it's concentrated benefits and concentrated costs. Remember, this is perceived. Interest groups over here, on the opposite side of majoritarian. And so interest group politics, policy which one small group benefits and another small group pays. So not the same people paying, maybe. And it's often small concentrated groups that are involved in the interest group politics. Examples given in here is debates between television broadcasters and cable companies over what kind of signals can be to which homes. One of the things that we're going to look at is the American Nazi Party wants to march predominantly Jewish neighborhood carrying flags with swastikas on them. The community may organize to prevent them from doing that. And we're going to talk about that in chapter 5. Client politics is a policy in which one small group benefits and almost everyone pays. This is going to be ESL classes, that kind of thing, where federal government pays for things. or a local things. A senator wants to get reelected, so they do pork barrel legislation, legislation that gives tangible benefits to constituents in several districts or states in the hope of winning their votes in return. So something specifically for your state, some major project, something that creates a lot of jobs, puts a lot of money in your local economy, but doesn't necessarily affect the rest of the country. And then we have this term called log rolling, where a legislator supports a proposal favored by a colleague with reciprocal support for a proposal endorsed by the legislator. So I'll vote for yours if you vote for mine. And that used to be a real common thing. Maybe not so much now. Entrepreneurial politics, the final one here, is concentrated costs and distributed benefits. So a limited number of people are paying for it in perception and distributed benefits. There's a caveat here to entrepreneurial politics, and that is that it's a policy which almost everyone benefits and a small group pays. Say you have a Superfund site or a badly polluted spot, and the company that did the polluting has to pay into the Superfund, and eventually it gets cleaned up as technology is developed to do the cleanup. And we didn't have the technology when we first started doing the Superfund stuff. But it's not really the company that pays for it, because their costs for paying for it go to their customers. So the people who buy from them actually pay for everything. There's no such thing as any kind of tax or anything like this that only affects certain people. It always affects everybody who's a customer of that business. So if they put a tax on cars, at each level of taxation, possible taxation, there's going to be more possibility of everybody contributing to the paying in this. People called policy entrepreneurs and activists in or out of government pulled together a political majority on behalf of unorganized interests, where they don't necessarily have anything. There's no real advocate. Ralph Nader would be known as one because he started the whole consumer advocate movement, auto safety, seatbelts, that sort of thing. He ran for president and the Green Party, and kind of started that movement. And you can read all of that. So politics dynamics inside and outside the box. Superfunds also thereby illustrate how dynamic the politics of policymaking can be. One issue makes its way to the political agenda. The politics of the issue can remain stable, change a little or a lot, and change very slowly or quite suddenly. Again, things can move from one box to the other. So Obamacare fits all four boxes, maybe. The Medicare Act of 1965, Democrats in the House and Senate voted for a wide margin, but roughly half of the Republicans in each chamber also supported it. In 2010, the healthcare bill passed without any Republican support. In other words, 1965 Medicare bill that President Lyndon Johnson signed into law had broader bipartisan backing, but the 2010 healthcare bill that President Obama signed into law had none. It's majoritarian politics because the bill was opposed by a majority of Americans for a variety of reasons. Many thought it was too expensive or worried about the government regulations the law contained. It fits in decline politics because drug manufacturers look forward to having many new customers as more people own health insurance. It was interest group politics because the labor unions wanted healthcare coverage, but the business firms were upset by the higher taxes and the fees they would have to pay. Poorer people liked it, but those earning $200,000 a year would see their taxes escalate. it's big, also becomes, we get our policy entrepreneurs in here, entrepreneurial politics. The winners in 2010, the winners were President Obama and the Democrat leaders in the House who got a bill passed over in popular and interest group opposition. So this particular one can be to fit into all four categories. And that is kind of how that can work. Well, many times we'll look at there's be one of these in every chapter, dealing with the issues in each chapter, where we'll look at the perceived costs and the perceived benefits. And so this is going to be something we're going to do with every chapter. The biggest issue that we'll have to deal with when we're dealing with power and understanding politics is that preferences are what's we're talking at. What do you prefer? Do you prefer this or do you prefer that? And people get what the politicians believe people prefer. That's kind of how government works. And one thing we'll have in the book here is, what would you do? Questions. Will you favor or oppose a ban on initiatives? And then they'll give you arguments for and against. And in your MindTap homework, you will have a choice to make and write a statement about how it affected your thinking about this issue. And that is the end of chapter 1. We'll look forward to chapter 2 coming up.